What's up YouTube? It's Nerdy, and welcome to the final battle video for the Transmissions Draft League Season number 4. For the second season in a row, we have made the Grand Finals, and hopefully this time we're going to be able to take it down. Of course, we have got a rematch for our Week 7 game here. The Season 4 sweepers are on the other side, looking to actually sweep it up. Of course, we were their only loss during this entire season, so we're hoping to make it to, and we're hoping to crown ourselves grand champion. So let's go ahead and meet the team that is hopefully going to be able to get that done. To start off, we have got Indeedee Female. This is very different from the Indeedee that we brought to the last time we played this match. The last time we played this match, it was also Psychic Seed, but we had a couple of key differences. The first one being that we were maxed out on our physical bulk. This was because, aside from Squawkabilly, we didn't have very many answers to Iron Hands, and while that is still the case, the truth is that Iron Hands actually isn't that threatening for us to go up against. It requires the Terra to not immediately lose to some of our stronger offensive options. And even against Indeedee, it's not threatening one-hit KOs unless it gets a boost. And the idea is to not let it get a boost in the first place. Plus, it is very Squawkabilly weak, so that is something to keep in mind. The other big difference is that we actually ended up dropping skill swap for light screen. Now, in the last time that we played this game, of course, we were worried that our opponent could be running something like Misty Terrain on the Clef key. Now, the truth is that we actually don't really need Psychic Terrain that badly. Of course, it's a really nice thing to have, as it's our most consistent damage option for Iron Crown, and it does boost Indeedee's damage enough to make it very threatening. But, like I said, it's not necessary for our strategy. We don't need to be doing spread damage in order to win the game, and for that reason, we're probably going to be okay without getting that extra boost. On top of that, we have decided that light screen is a lot more effective in slowing down a Pokemon like the Archaludon, which, despite 616 not super valuing it in the last time that we matched up, I think is still quite threatening to us. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that, but of course we will get to what our answers are for it later on. Light screen, of course, does also help us with a Pokemon like the Basque Legion. Also, later down, you will see that we are also bringing a Calm Mind Iron Crown. So the idea is basically that we're going to take our time a little bit more in this game, but we still have the high-end damage potential that we've always had, including off the bat with something like Hariyama. The idea is just that because our opponent needs to play around our strategies a little bit more carefully, we can take advantage of a lot of the time and space that that creates in order to set up a Pokemon like Iron Crown, or to be disruptive with a Pokemon like Squawkabilly, or start taking immediate KOs with a Pokemon like Hariyama. Like I mentioned, Iron Crown is in fact a Calm Mind set. We're also Booster Energy for the Booster Special Attack. This is because after a +1 boost, if the Archaludon decides to Terra, even if the Terra is not something that is weak to either Psychic or Steel, as long as it doesn't resist one or the other, it does start to get into range of being knocked out unless it is Assault Vest. And of course, if it is Assault Vest, then that means Iron Hands can have it, meaning that Pokemon's even more manageable. But we do have answers for even Assault Vest Archaludon. Indeedee, like I said, able to slow that Pokemon down. If we can ignore the Archaludon for a long period of time, that gives us an extra chance to set up Calm Minds. If we get to +2, then that Pokemon is even less threatening to actually manage. On top of that, the Calm Mind boosts are actually like super necessary when it comes to defensive calcs as well. At +1, with a light screen up, we actually take very minimal damage from the Shadow Ball from a Basque Legion. If I go ahead and pull this up real quick. So Basque Legion with the choice specs, Shadow Ball versus Crown. And we are even a little bit more bulky than this set, but ignore that. So we go +1 with a light screen up. We actually live 2 Shadow Balls, meaning that after our first Calm Mind boost, our second one does also give us the ability to live 2 more. And yeah, we also are guaranteed to Oko that Pokemon back with a +1 expanding force in the Psychic Terrain. And of course, we do outspeed that Pokemon unless we are in the rain. Or if they want to go for a Choice Scarf adaptability set, that could be a little bit more threatening, of course, if they decide to go adaptability with the Choice Scarf. It's still a really minuscule chance. They'd have to get 2 maximum rolls in a row in order for Shadow Ball to 2-hit KO. So obviously excellent news for Iron Crown there. On top of that, of course, like I said, we do have really good damage mitigation options thanks to Squawkabilly, who does outspeed a majority of our opponent's team, aside from, like we said, that either Choice Scarf or the Swift Swim Basque Legion. But our opponent's team is incredibly slow, again, outside of the Pokemon that we don't really want to consider playing against. Tornadus is pretty weak against our team. It doesn't deal enough damage and just doesn't have a good defensive profile versus our team. Aside from a Pokemon like Hariyama, and even in that case, of course, we are willing to spend the Terra on Hariyama. I think the most likely Pokemon to get our Terra is probably the Hariyama, actually. And then for Greninja, Greninja is super frail, so although it might be really nice to give Archuludon stamina boosts, after that, it doesn't really help with a whole lot. Yes, it can wall out the Indeedee, and it does outspeed and threaten to hit it for pretty big damage, but even Indeedee doesn't take that much from it thanks to the special defense boost, and a Helping Hand Tachyon Cutter actually does really hurt that Pokemon. And again, it's really weak to Hariyama. And then Raichu. Raichu's best feature is that it can probably snipe the Squawkabilly. I don't know how much he's going to value that. He might value that a lot. The other good thing for it is that it can use our own Psychic Terrain against us, but that's honestly a really bad idea, considering that it will not hurt either of our Psychic Terrain Pokemon, especially Crown, who 4 times resists the Expanding Force. But even Hariyama, getting that Terra Steel will resist it and then threatens a ton of damage back. Just in general, our opponent's team is not really lined up to perfectly take advantage of the fact that we have Psychic Terrain. So he's either kind of got to try to mitigate its usefulness or try to get rid of it altogether. And of course, because we're considering Psychic Terrain not like absolutely imperative to have, then it gives us a lot more flexibility in what kind of game plan we want to lean into. Squawkabilly is next up. This is just because we may or may not be underselling Iron Hands a lot. If we are, of course, Intimidate is really nice. It at least forced him to try to pick the Clear Amulet. If he does pick the Clear Amulet, of course, that is a little bit tougher to handle. But again, Iron Hand's defensive profile, if it doesn't have the Assault Vest, is not great. And it needs a Terra Steel in order to not immediately lose to Iron Crown. And if it does Terra Steel, it immediately loses to Hariyama. So we have a lot of really good pins for that. Even if it's a Terra Psychic, knockoff from Hariyama is going to hurt a lot. Tachyon Cutter is still going to do really good damage now that it's not resisted. And if we have our boost, it might even KO that Pokemon. Iron Hands is really bulky, so I doubt it. But the final of our big 4 is, of course, Hariyama. Hariyama just patches up all of our bad matchups. It's really good into Archuludon with the close combat. one thing I did want to mention, by the way, for the Squawkabilly, is that we are running Final Gambit. There are a couple of Pokemon that we can snipe off the bat with that Final Gambit, including a non-max HP Archaludon, so we'll keep an eye out to see if we can calc out what set the Archaludon is running. But the idea is that even if it is max HP Archaludon, any amount of chip damage does put it in range of Final Gambit. We do always outspeed that Pokemon unless he manages to set up a Tailwind. So we should keep that in mind. The other really nice thing about Squawkabilly though is that because we are faster than the Arch, Klefki sets up Rain, and then before the Archaludon can move, we set up the Sun, meaning if it clicked Electro Shot on that turn, it is now charging for an entire turn, giving us essentially 2 free turns against this Pokemon, where we can set up, for example, Iron Crown, do a little bit of damage, and take it out with Final Gambit before it can react. For the Hariyama, like I said, it patches up all of those really bad matchups, including ones after Terra. So if Archaludon decides to Terra into something like Fairy type, of course it's really weak to Iron Crown. But there's not really a good Terra type for it, aside from like maybe Terra Psychic. If it is Terra Psychic, of course it does take a ton of damage from Knockoff, and then Knockoff being able to remove its Assault Vest does mean that it is even more vulnerable to Tachyon Cutter, especially if we are managing to get that boost up. Heavy Slam is really good if it decides to go Terra Fairy, or anything else that decides to go Terra Fairy. Close Combat is also our most consistent damage option. We hit basically everything on our opponent's team for at least neutral damage, and coming off of our Guts boosted attacks, that is obviously really strong. And now one thing to mention about Hariyama set is we are extremely fast. We are actually trying to speed creep a no speed investment Archaludon, so we're incredibly fast to do that. We have very little attack investment, so that if Archaludon remains a Steel type, we actually do KO that Pokemon as long as it's not like super physically bulky, which I imagine it's not going to be. He's going to have a lot of special defense investment, even if he has the Assault Vest, just to not immediately lose to like a boosted Expanding Force. And then we also have a ton of special defense investment. This is basically just to cover for the fact that we may or may not need to use Hariyama as a pivot on top of the damage output. And with Light Screen and damage mitigation with Squawkabilly, Hariyama should be able to stick around for a lot longer than I think 616 will be prepared for, which allows it to fire off even more of those really big attacks. And so honestly, I think the idea with our first 4 is just really consistent damage that is really tough for our opponent to handle. Now the final 2 Pokemon are kind of just our backup plans. So we do have Grafaiai here. We're eject button because we can switcheroo the eject button onto something like an Archaludon that is super set up and therefore not really easy for us to handle. Give it the eject button and force it to switch out. Encore is also really nice for taking on something like Klefki if it decides to lock into something like the Rain Dance or the Light Screen. We can Encore it into that, make sure that it's not able to help its team anymore, and then we can override the Rain with the Sun. And then Knockoff, as I mentioned on Hariyama, is actually just really nice. We can remove things like the Clear Amulet on the Iron Hands, we can remove the Assault Vest on the Archaludon, and then it does really consistent damage versus Sinistra and the Basket Legion, which is obviously really nice to have. Obviously the only downside is that this thing really can't hurt something like the Iron Hands or the Greninja. Greninja I'm not so worried about, but the Iron Hands, if Squawkabilly plus the Psychic Spam mode is not enough, which I have a hard time seeing would be the case, but if that is the case, Grafaiai is not going to help too much there, aside from forcing the Iron Hands out and allowing our team to make a little bit more progress before we have to deal with the Iron Hands. And then finally, we do have Ogerpon. So the idea with Ogerpon is just that all of the low tier Pokemon really match up poorly into Ogerpon. Plus, we do have coverage in low kick in order to handle something like the Archiludon. But even then, Sturdy plus Hornleech is really solid because we can snipe out the Basculegion and the Greninja really easily. Ivy Cudgel is really consistent damage into everything not named Iron Hands or Archiludon. And then we do have the low kick, like I mentioned, for the Archiludon. So Ogerpon is just really consistent damage as a backup to if something like Hariyama or Iron Crown is not working out. But overall, I think that this is our most consistent team for taking on 616. We put a little bit more spice into the pot the last time we played this match, and I think we have a much more consistent game plan going into this, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. But that is all I have for the team section. Hopefully you also watched the team builder video, and hopefully we can get a win here today and we can be the champions for season 4. So I will see you in the match. All right, we have made it into the match. Let's go ahead and see what 616 has decided to bring. Looks like the same 6 that we kind of prepared for, aside from Braviary being replaced with Frostmoth here. And we have a Choice Specs, Adaptability, and Terra Water Basculegion. Makes sense, that is what worked for him last time. Choice Scarf Archiludon is very interesting. Again, still not going with the Stamina and Body Press set. Instead, going with a Scarf and Snarl, it looks like. The Choice Scarf does complicate our Squawkabilly matchup a little bit. Terra Ghost is also really funny on Archiludon, as it doesn't really help versus Hariyama all that much. We have a Focus Sash Frostmoth, who is also Terra Ghost. Lots of Terra Ghost on our opponent's team. A Terra Dragon for Iron Hands, who is Heavy Slam Close Combat and Supercell Slam. Booster Energy, probably booster attack there. No Fake Out is good to keep in mind. We see Steel Beam, Rain Dance, Trick Room, and Thunder Wave on Klefki. Very interesting there. Of course, Thunder Wave is something that we want to avoid, so keeping Psychic Terrain up as much as possible will be very nice. And then we have also a Terra Dragon Sinisha, who also has Trick Room as well, Shadow Ball, and Machakacha, or the attacks of choice. So it appears that our opponent is going with a bit of a Trick Room strategy backed up by a Scarf Archiludon. This could go a few different ways. So of course Klefki does kind of support both of the modes that 616 can play. So having some good Klefki hate is definitely appreciated. I like the ability to lead with something like the Squawkabilly. It does help a lot with a lot of our different matchups, including the Iron Hands, who is not Clear Amulet, so the Squawkabilly does help a lot, like I said. Final Gambit also into Klefki is going to be really, really nice. Now, the biggest thing, though, is that I also kind of want Indeedee in lead. The ability to set up Light Screen is obviously really nice. And on top of that, it kind of walls everything aside from the Iron Hands. So I think one of our more consistent leads is going to be Iron Crown and Indeedee. It allows us to get set up right away. We can start pumping out some damage really quickly. And even if Frostmoth is in lead, that thing does not really want to take a +1 boosted Tachyon Cutter. So let's go ahead and pull up Frostmoth versus Crown with a Tachyon Cutter. And we are max special attack. And we are booster energy. So we will actually require either a helping hand or a +1 boost if we want to guaranteed Oko this Pokemon while it is still an ice type. If this Pokemon becomes a ghost type, we will not be able to take it out even with both a +1 and a helping hand boost. But like I said, we are not needing to do spread damage here, so I think just the ability to be able to sit in front of a Pokemon like Frosmoth is probably going to be just fine. So let's go ahead and lead our 2 dynamic duos there. Squawkabilly, like I said, really good for the Iron Hands matchup, and honestly may help us with the matchup versus the Basculegion and the Arch. Remember that it is adaptability and not Swift Swim, so we can actually outspeed that Pokemon and set up the Sun before it can make use of the Rain. And then Hariyama is definitely our back Pokemon. I'm actually trying to reconsider if I want Indeedee in lead or not. So if we lead Iron Crown Squawkabilly, this is really good if Basculegion is in lead, and even if Klefki is in lead. Yeah, let's go ahead and actually lead Iron Crown and Squawkabilly, and our back 2 Pokemon are going to be Indeedee, Hariyama. Let's see what 616 wants to lead. It is Klefki, Archaludon. So pretty simple lead for our opponent there. Now, this thing can't really hurt us all too much, so I think, honestly, our best bet is going to be to go ahead and click Calm Mind. Now we have a couple of things that we can do with the Squawkabilly here. We can Parting Shot here to make sure that the Archaludon is not dealing a ton of damage here. We can also Final Gambit into the Klefki to guarantee take out that Pokemon. This also allows us to bring in the Indeedee pretty safely here. I think the pretty obvious play for him is the Snarl. And I think I would rather have 2 Pokemon that don't deal any damage rather than him be able to bring in an additional Pokemon that does deal damage. So let's go ahead and Parting Shot into the Archaludon here. Now, the safest play, of course, in order to dodge a Thunder Wave here, would be to Terra Electric here. So I'm going to go ahead and make that play. It's pretty safe for us, so let's go ahead and Calm Mind here, and we are going to Parting Shot the Archaludon here. Alright, Basculegion is actually going to be the switch as we see a Terra Ghost. Snarl does actually come out here. And we are going to go ahead and go for that Calm Mind here. Parting Shot does go into the Archaludon. And now we have a lot of options here, as mentioned. Indeedee is a really safe switch here. I believe at -1. Let's see. If we go ahead and bring up -1 Archaludon, or sorry, Iron Crown versus the Arch, who is non-bulky but is Terra Ghost. Tachyon Cutter doing good damage there, and Expanding Force doing really good damage. And if we pull up Bask here, Expanding Force also doing good damage there. A Helping Hand boosted is nearly KOing the Basculegion, and we are Terra Electric. And we also have +1 special defense, so we're not taking any damage from this Basculegion. Even they would need a Terra Water Choice Specs Hydro Pump to land in order to really do meaningful damage here. I think we just send it and we go ahead and go into Indeedee. And then, like I said, if we go ahead and bring up Arch here, who is now a Terra Ghost Pokemon. Terra Ghost and Helping Hand Expanding Force does have a really good chance to KO this Pokemon, even from -1. So let's go ahead and click that Helping Hand and Expanding Force coming out here. Let's see what he can do here. Helping Hand boost comes out. Snarl going to connect on both and gets a special attack drop. Arch going to barely survive that as Muddy Water actually misses the Indeedee. Iron Crown taking very minimal damage there. We can go ahead and protect and take out the Archaludon here. Psychic will be able to take that Pokemon out, as we also see Indeedee is faster than Basculegion, which is definitely important to note. We've gotten more than we need out of Iron Crown here at this point. If we go ahead and click yet another Helping Hand Expanding Force, we should be good to go here. Let's go ahead and do so. We most likely don't need a Helping Hand to KO the Basque here. If we pull up this, so we did roughly 65%, so this is a very bulky Basculegion. This is very, very bulky, actually. So a non-Helping Hand boosted does KO, so we can pretty safely go ahead. It's most likely the Iron Hands as the final, so let's go ahead and actually just click Psychic here. It is Iron Hands that actually switches in here, as Expanding Force is going to do a ton of damage to that Pokemon, as Psychic connects on the Klefki, doing a little bit of damage, and Trick Room going to go up here. Now, once again, really bad news for our opponent here is that we can just click Expanding Force again and click Follow Me. He has no quick way through these two Pokemon, so, or for at least the Indeedee. He can KO the Indeedee here, but he will unfortunately forfeit all of his Iron Hands HP if he does not protect here. And I'd actually be shocked if Klefki can KO with Steel Beam here. Okay, Follow Me comes out. No Protect as Rain Dance is going to come out. Heavy Slam does KO. However, he will lose his Iron Hands for the Troubles. And once again, we are in a pretty safe position here. Let's go ahead and we definitely want to try to make it out of Trick Room. So let's go ahead and go into our Squawkabilly here. Now, there is no Psychic Terrain set up here, and we are very likely to die to a Muddy Water here, so let's go ahead and go for Protect. If Squawkabilly manages to dodge here, we can go ahead and set up Sunny Day and put this thing in a really tough position. Now, once again, I'd be really shocked if Squawkabilly can live any sort of attack here. I think he's probably deciding whether or not he wants to lock into Ice Beam here, which I think would be the wrong play for him, if I'm being honest. It should definitely be Muddy Water here. The problem is I only have to make it through 3 turns of Trick Room to guaranteed win this game, and he also has a chance to miss Muddy Waters. I'd be interested to see what he's actually thinking about here. Of course, I think he's probably considering whether or not he wants to Thunderwave a Pokemon here. I think that would probably be a throw. If he lands it onto the Squawkabilly here, I believe we do underspeed. And then once we do underspeed, of course, we set up the Sun. If he clicked a water move, he's in really big trouble because he is locked into that. Let's see what he goes for here. It is Rain Dance, actually, as Muddy Water does connect onto the Squawkabilly, so it will go down there. And we can go ahead and bring in Hariyama. Let's go ahead and click Expanding Force here. We are going to try and take out the Basculegion here. And then for the Hariyama, I'd be shocked to see if Basculegion can actually get the KO here. It does not have Terra Water available to it. But we are in the rain. Muddy Water should be able to KO the Iron Crown from this position. But if we bring up our Hariyama, we are pretty bulky here. Oh, that is the wrong set. So we are 44 and 244. Which means he would need a Hydro Pump in order to do so. So we are pretty safe to go ahead and go for knockoff here. Yeah, the truth is he really needs a crit here, and even with a crit, Muddy Water doesn't get a KO. So he needs Steel Beam, which does not KO. Muddy Water actually does get the KO here, and that is a win for them in Game 1. GG's for Game 1. Alright, let's go ahead and get into Game number 2. We can... Honestly, I think we can pretty much go for the same lead here. I think that honestly, the only difference that may work a little bit better is setting up Light Screen with Indeedee. This also allows us to play a little bit more aggressively in lead instead of just going ahead and clicking Calm Mind on turn 1. So let's go ahead and make that adjustment. I don't think that there's really much to consider here. We definitely have the correct 4, and I think it's pretty obvious what he is trying to do. But let's make sure that we can lock in here. Hopefully we can bring it to a game number 3 here. I think the interesting thing is, of course, like I said, he did build quite bulky. And the really fun thing about this, though, is that we have also built quite bulky. So we can honestly play the long game here. Remember, because his best Trick Room options are Basculegion and Hariyama, or sorry, Iron Crown, we can actually deal with this a lot of the same ways that we would otherwise. So let's go ahead and start this off by clicking light screen, and I'm going to go ahead and click I'm probably going to just click Calm Mind here. There's no reason really to click Terra. That being said, there's no reason not to either. So let's go ahead and just click Calm Mind here. Light screen plus Calm Mind. I think, honestly, it's very likely that he just clicks Snarl again. I'm not 100% sure what the Klefki wants to do here. Probably Rain Dance in order to set up for the Basculegion. He could also click Trick Room here, but because I'm not planning on getting rid of the Archaludon all that fast, he could be in a really rough spot. Alright, Terra does come out, and it is Snarl. The crit is a little bit unfortunate, might not end up mattering in the end as light screen goes up. Trick Room is the option from our friend Klefki. Alright, I don't really see a reason not to switch in Hariyama here. It's a really safe switch for us, and we can just continue setting up Calm Minds with our Iron Crown. So Rain Dance does come out as Calm Mind going to be set up. Snarl comes out from our opponents. Here, now we are in a pretty good position with our Hariyama. If I go ahead and bring up Klefki, we have Heavy Slam, and we are Adamant. A little bit of attack investment. Let's see, Close Combat is stronger, and Knockoff is not very good into this Pokemon. Let's go ahead and actually just click Knockoff here. Like I said, really safe to do so, and we can go ahead and click Expanding Force here. Steel Beam, not going to do a ton of damage here thanks to the light screen here. Expanding Force, good damage on both, and we do manage to take out the Klefki. Snarl does a little bit of damage there as well. Basculegion going to come in here. We can go ahead and go for the Protect. Now, once again, we know that Expanding Force does not KO here. However, our opponent does need to go for a Hydro Pump in order to get a KO here. So we can go ahead and just click Expanding Force once again. We got 2 more turns of Trick Room to get through. So let's go ahead and do so. Now, with the calcs that I did make, if we go ahead and pull up Basculegion once again, this is adaptability in the rain. Muddy Water versus this Hariyama most likely gets the KO, it looks like. So we can also go ahead and bring our Ndidi back in. Oh, remember, we do actually have light screen, so we actually should live this. Now, we're very likely not slower than this Basculegion, actually. Unless it is just 0 investment. Let's go ahead and go for the Knockoff here, and I'm just going to click Expanding Force. Again, no real reason not to. We get free damage here, and if both Pokemon make it through the turn, we're able to just double protect and the Trick Room, and we are ahead pretty safely. Once again, it's probably the Iron Hands in the back, and we do have answers for that. It is Hydro Pump, actually, is the switch up for our opponent as Snarl continues here. We can go ahead and bring in the Ndidi. Now, once again, I think Protect is pretty readable for our opponent here. I think we can honestly catch him out a little bit here by going for a Helping Hand Expanding Force. So let's see if he reads this. We may end up losing the game if he does end up targeting into the Iron Crown, but we do have +2 special defense and a light screen up. So once again, I'd kind of be surprised if we do die to this. Helping Hand comes out as Hydro Pump actually goes into the Indeedee. Expanding Force will take out the Archaludon. And we are down to a 2v1, or a 2v2, sorry. Hold on, Evie. It's okay. I know, baby. That's alright. I know, baby. Alright, let's go ahead and click Parting Shot here, as Expanding Force should be able to take out the Basket Legion and do some really good damage to this Iron Hands, who can no longer Terra. Parting Shot does come out, lowering the attack stat there, as Hydro Pump going to miss on the Squawkabilly. Close Combat fails to take out the Iron Crown here. And now we can go ahead and go for the Brave Bird into this slot. And I think Protect is probably going to be our safer option here. Protect also does come out from the Iron Hands, as Brave Bird takes out the Basket Legion. And now we can go Brave Bird and Expanding Force into the Iron Hands, who at -1 defense and special defense should not be able to live the double up. And we should be cruising to a game 3. Actually, a Brave Bird crit does bring us to a game 2. Here, I know. Here. Lick. All right. Game number 3 here, and we are set up in a pretty interesting spot. Hariyama been kind of ineffective, if I'm being honest. That being said, our dynamic duo is doing it again. And let's see if we can get the job done here. I think that honestly, the way that the games have been starting has kind of been in our favor. And as long as we make it through Trick Room, I see no reason that we can't continue that luck. I know. There you go, baby. There you go. Alright, let's see what kind of adjustments that our opponent can make. Let's see what they are going to go for here. We see Archaludon and Klefki as the lead once again. Our opponent sticking to their game plan as we stick to ours. We are going to make, I think we're probably going to make the same plays here. However, once again, I'm not super threatened by the amount of damage that this Archaludon can do. Assuming that we dodge a crit here, a light screen plus a Calm Mind should be really nice. And then the ability to have Terra Grass for our Indeedee is going to be really nice for the Basket Legion matchup. Snarl does come out, does really good damage onto both, as we set up a Calm Mind and a light screen. The Trick Room is then set up. Let's see if we have the same turns here. I do think that is pretty likely that our opponent goes ahead and goes for the Rain Dance and the Snarl once again. And so I think what I would rather do here is maybe try to take out the Klefki. Let's go ahead and give that a shot, actually. Let's go ahead and go for a Helping Hand Tachyon Cutter here. This does have a chance to actually take out the Klefki, as it does go down. And now Archaludon does connect on yet another Snarl. Iron Hand's actually going to be the switch here. So once again, we have a lot of options here. My favorite of them being that we can switch into Squawkabilly at any point here. Now, we are at -2 special attack on our Indeedee, and we don't necessarily need the Psychic Terrain here. So I think it is probably a lot nicer to actually just go ahead and go for a Psychic as we switch into the Squawkabilly here. The other option is, of course, to switch Squawkabilly in on this side. Anything that Iron Hands can do is stopped, of course, by the fact that we do get it to -1. I think, once again, though, I would rather bring in the Squawkabilly on this side. It also gives us the ability to reverse the Rain, setting up Sun, so that when Basculegion comes back in, it's not going to enjoy this. This also allows us to stall out turns of Trick Room a lot easier. And assuming that it is the Basculegion, 616 can't set up the Trick Room again, meaning that his only speedy Pokemon is going to be the Archaludon, and it is locked into the... Okay, Close Combat actually going to take it out there, as Psychic does moderate damage there. Snarl does connect once again. Okay. Now, we are in a pretty safe position, if I'm being honest here. At -1 special defense here, and -1 attack. Let's go ahead and bring up Hands with the booster energy. Boosting that attack, and I am going to assume that it is max attack and adamant. We're looking at a Crown versus this Pokemon. And you are at -1. Let's see if Close Combat can get the knockout. We are at 60%, so it does actually get the knockout, so we will require a Follow Me. And you are Terra Dragon at -1 special defense. It does look like that will get the knockout. We do not have our booster energy though. But we will be able to get that knockout. So let's go ahead and bring in our Iron Crown. We're going to go ahead and go for a Follow Me and an Expanding Force here. This is pretty safe here. We actually prefer if Indeedee does go down here. Expanding Force going to come out here and does really good damage there. Now, with the light screen up, let's see if actually Bask can actually KO our Iron Crown with Muddy Water while light screen is up. And they are, instead of Swift Swim, Adaptability. So there is a role that Muddy Water actually does get that KO. So interestingly, I think what I would rather do is go ahead and go for a... So Terra Steel is interesting on the Hariyama. It's obviously not very good because of the Iron Hands here. Let's go ahead and go for a Terra Grass actually, see if we can catch this Basculegion trying to KO our Iron Crown. And let's go ahead and go for a Psychic. We probably here want to KO the Basculegion 4. And then here we are going to protect. I think that is our safest play there. Now remember, our opponent does have a fully healthy Archuludon in the back with a Choice Scarf. That Pokemon most likely will need the rain in order to be super threatening versus our team. But something to keep in mind here is that once this Iron Hands is gone, we are in a much better position to actually use Terra Steel. So there is a consideration for that. I want to save the Terra Steel. I think I do actually. Let's go ahead and not use the Terra. We're going to Psychic and we're going to Protect here. Once again, if indeed he goes down here, that is completely fine. Whatever extra damage it can get here is just a little bit extra on the top. And once again, I am reconsidering. Let's actually try to get some extra damage down onto this Iron Hands. If we manage to get the extra damage, Expanding Force actually does catch this thing even outside of the Psychic terrain. Hydro Pump does go into the Protect, which is good news for us here. So now we are in a decent position here. We can go ahead and now that this thing is locked into a single target attack, we can go ahead and go for the Follow Me here. Now the unfortunate news is that Expanding Force doesn't get this KO. Actually, it looks like it does most of the time. Versus the Basket Legion. And we also saw that Basket Legion moves before the Iron Hands, who is at -1 attack. And is the only one that can protect. So we are going to go for the Follow Me here. And Expanding Force is likely going to be our choice versus the Basket Legion. But let me go ahead and see if this Iron Hands at -1 defense with a Terra Dragon can actually live this. It actually takes more damage from attacking on Cutter, but it does most likely go down to an Expanding Force. I think I'd rather go for the more consistent KO into the Basket Legion here. Because this Iron Hands can protect. That's kind of my thought process here. Okay, Follow Me does come out. Expanding Force doesn't quite get the KO there, as Hydro Pump does take out Indeedee. Close Combat does take out the Iron Crown, so unfortunate there. However, we can bring in our Hariyama. And now I think what we have to do is we have to probably hope for a Hydro Pump miss. So we're going to start off with a Protect. This allows us to get our burn going. And Hariyama with the Flame Orb boost versus Iron Hands in this state. It is at -1 defense. Close Combat is necessary in order to get this KO, it looks like, because Heavy Slam is going to be really weak versus this Pokemon, even with the Terra Steel. Now, it is interesting if we want to see which of our moves does more damage, or which of our opponent's moves does more damage. So let's bring out Close Combat. If we don't Terra, and they are at -1, and they do have the Cork Drive attack boost, so Close Combat's doing about 50%. then the Basque Legion, no longer in the rain with the adaptability boost, is using Hydro Pump. Hydro Pump does significantly more damage, so we are going to go ahead and go for the knockoff here. That is necessary here for sure. As Close Combat comes out, right? Now we're going to go ahead and Terror Steel. Let's go ahead and go for that Close Combat into the Iron Hands. It looks like we aren't going to live that Draco Meteor as 616 manages to get the win. Congratulations to him. That Trick Room set was very neat. Taking a page out of my own book, it looks like. So congratulations. Definitely a very deserved win there. Some very weird sets and a very 616 way to win. So congratulations to him. And GG's. Unfortunate that we actually come up short once again in the grand finals, but that is all I have for you all, and I will hopefully see you in the recap for our season 4 run. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.